Hello and welcome. My name is Matthew Marquardt. In this particular video, I want to show you guys real quick how we can kind of backwards engineer images, examples of ancient looking architecture, ancient looking scenery, and really figure out what is going on so that we can recreate those things in our textures. So usually I start off on, I'll have this live in a classroom or whatever, and obviously I can't, ask those questions or whatever. We can talk about it kind of in real time here. And this particular image is one of the first images that I kind of show off first. And I asked the students to go, you know what? Anybody can tell me and look at that and say, hey, that's ancient. But the thing is, you being the artist, you need to be able to figure out exactly why does it look ancient? Why is it feeling the way that it does? Why does it look that way in particular? And understand things like the line work, the texture of it, the color, the value, lots of different things, shapes, stuff like that. And these are things and like elements of design in general. You have to be able to determine what exactly it is, because if you're going to try to recreate something in a texture, in a scene, in an environment, you can't do it unless you really know what you're looking at. And then you can go back and actually recreate it in Photoshop and your favorite modeling programming, Maya or Max or whatever. So the real idea, of course, is that we look at this and we know, yes, anyone can tell me it's ancient, but we need to break it down and really figure out why. So usually when I ask, what do you guys see about this? First thing is they say, well, it's overgrown. So clearly when we're talking about something being really old, yeah, it's going to have time to have stuff grow on it. You can see the stonework here. That's an important thing to remember too, is the material. So when it comes to ancient, one of the things they'll pick out a lot of times too is when they see something, you know it's ancient because of the material. The material almost always is stone, and the reason why it's stone is because that was the material they had back then. They didn't necessarily build in metal or other things that could potentially last longer, but at the same time, if they built in wood or anything else, it would have rotted away by now. So it could be old, but it definitely wouldn't be ancient if it was wood or things like that, unless it was well preserved somehow. So these are the things that are kind of out in the environment, not so well preserved. So usually stone tends to be something you'll see quite often in ancient. Now you also see this kind of weathering damage. So it really depends on the climate. Clearly this climate has a lot of rain. And because of that, we get these water stains kind of coming down the edge of this object. So these are really important things to consider, of course, when we're looking at that. And then colors too. I mean, perhaps the color might have been something to this effect over the whole thing. We see a lot of variances in colors as far as things have gotten stained and dirtied over time and so on and so forth. Also, we see cracks and erosion and other stuff, which also helps sell us that this is really old. Now let's take a look at this image right here too. So this could be, I'm not really sure what it is, but it could be ancient Incan, Mayan or something. But the reason why we look at this when we figure out that it's old is, one, we do kind of understand some of the old actual styles and architecture. So we can recognize Egyptian type stuff or something in this case, right, which would be a South American kind of ancient looking drawings. But we also see that it's so beat up and the colors have become slightly muted from what they used to be, right? The colors are all starting to set in this earth tone. So even though they might have been bright colors originally, the dirt over years is layered on top and has kind of created this effect. So everything's kind of tinted a certain color. In this case, kind of this yellowish brown color, even though we see some of this other stuff. We see a lot of wear and tear, things getting, written over. And of course, once again, the style is something that kind of clues us in to maybe how old it is. This building, we can kind of say right here, this is more of a pyramid. I believe this is a South American pyramid also. Don't quote me on it. But also at the same time, we can see a lot of erosion on the side. Same effect with lots of variances in colors and so on. This image, I always love this image. This is in Cambodia, and this tree kind of grows out of the building. So clearly it had to be there very, very long time for it to be able to grow over the building like that. But here's the great thing that I want you guys to keep in mind when you're doing ancient. You kind of see down here like parts of the building have fallen off. Like we see it erode and falling. But notice that they're down here, right? They're broken and they're down here on the ground. So yeah, when something breaks, it doesn't just disappear into nothingness, right? As it breaks, it falls down. You'll see remnants of the remains underneath, and lots of dirt that leads all the way up to the window, stuff like that. Lots of erosion, right? Wind blowing the dirt. So understand the climate is important, because then you'll know what kind of stuff and what kind of colors you're going to use. But once again, a lot of earth tones. So we're seeing browns, but we're seeing a lot of greens too, because of the moss or other plant life that might be in the scene. So always be mindful of that when you're choosing the colors that you're going to do when you're making something look ancient. Okay. So in this image, and it's a little blurry when it's zoomed up, but you kind of still get the idea. These stones would have probably been pretty tight together when it was first built, and you can see there's a lot of separation in them now over the years. Once again, we're getting that overgrown feel, but this just kind of really helps us know that we don't get a lot of straight lines, and even when they tried to do straight lines, it wasn't ever perfect. But years of erosion and things falling apart, they start getting a little wonky and lots of separation kind of in the material. Now this is a sculpture of a woman, and so a lot of times I'll ask the students, well, were the artists back then just really bad, or why does it look like this? Well, I mean, there's always a couple of things. Different styles were done different centuries. They weren't always trying to do things looking realistic. That wasn't really what they wanted or thought was beautiful when they created stuff. But you also got to keep in mind the tools. So what kind of tools did they have when they created this stuff? Their tools are going to be primitive. So a lot of times maybe their art is going to be primitive too. And it could have been more detailed. We don't know. It could have eroded over time. Another example, of course, in this image of things that are eroded and falling apart to the point where on this, we even see the material underneath it. So that's something you can do when you're creating effects to make things look really old. It's not only sell the outside top material, but really what's underneath it when parts of it have broken off and we see the underlying material beyond the surface. Okay, same kind of concept, right? We just look at this and I kind of have them question different things, Egyptian looking content and so on. And this is another thing that you'll see quite often is engravings, because once again, it's in stone, so you're going to see a lot of engravings, a lot of things that were kind of chiseled out of stone. So this really kind of gives you a sense also, this is a mask and whatever else. But once again, kind of toned down, muted colors. So this just gives you an idea of some things to think about when you're trying to backwards engineer an image, when you're trying to recreate it, whether it be through a texture, through the geometry, or both. I think it's really important to kind of think that way before you start, articulate exactly what's happening so that you can then replicate those exact things into your art. Hopefully this video helps you guys, and I'll see you in the next one.